Welcome to Gotta Ask. This is a presentation of Ump Life, the premier provider of customized umpire accessories and unique game use amenities. Tonight's guest is professional baseball umpire Joe West. Please type your questions in the chat box below, and we'll get them to Joe as soon as we can. If you would like to join during the live broadcast, please contact Umpire Speaks or post it in the chat area. This video will be posted to the Ump Life page after tonight's show for viewing, as well as the Ump Life TV channel on YouTube. Keep in mind this feed is about 30 to 40 seconds behind what you are currently seeing. And now the host of Gotta Ask, Ray Brownlee.
Are you there?
We're having a little bit of technical difficulty with Ray's microphone.
Is mine working?
Yours is working fine, Joe. Ray, check your mic, sir.
And for the truck? Thank you.
So let's, Joe, let's go ahead and talk for a few minutes while Ray's getting his mic sorted out.
Okay.
Welcome to Gotta Ask for tonight. So you've been around the game for a while, and let's just kind of start out and tell us about some of your early days in Major League Baseball and how you kind of got started, and go from there while Mike's working on his Ray's working on his mic.
Well, I got started when I was actually, it's kind of funny. I was a little leaguer in Greenville, North Carolina, and back then the parents had to come out and work the bases from the other league. There were two leagues in Greenville, North Carolina. There was the Target League and the North State League. And I was in the North State League playing for a team called RC Cola, which was the sponsor. And I was sitting in the stands watching this game, and there was no adult males there, and the parents that were supposed to umpire the game didn't show up. So Pete Caraway was the coach of the Optimus Little League team, and he said, well, let Joe West umpire the bases. So I umpired my first game when I was 12 years old in the same league I was playing in. And then later on, I kind of followed the umpire stuff, and when I went off to play football in college, they wouldn't let me play baseball because I had a full football scholarship. So I used to umpire the local high school games in the area. And this guy saw me work, and he was the supervisor of umpires for the Carolina League. His name was Malcolm Sykes. And he taught me little things like how to take your mask off without your hat coming off. Always hold your indicator in your left hand. And little things that no one really thinks of when they look at an umpire on the field. But 4 years later, when I went to umpire school, I was ahead of all the kids there because I already knew how to take my mask off without my hat coming off. I already knew to hold my indicator in my left hand. I already knew that you make signals with your right hand, and the only time you use your left hand with your mask was when you were calling foul. So little things like that. And so I finished first in the class in 1974, and then I started umpiring. My first professional stuff was really at Lakeland, Florida, with the Detroit Tigers minor league camp, and I started in the Western Carolina League, and I worked there for a season, and I was promoted to the Carolina League. And of course, I worked winter ball every year, which back then the guys that were married didn't work winter ball. So by the time I was, they were looking at me in the big leagues, I had already worked 600, maybe 700 games, and which was a lot because I was working every winter. And I went from the Carolina League to the Southern League in the same year. And I worked part of the Southern League my second year there. And Fred Flagg had come down to Instruction League the winter before, who was the supervisor of umpires for the National League. And he saw me umpiring with the guy they were looking at, and he took me instead of that guy. And so that's how I went to the National League.
Tony, am I working now?
Yeah, we got your mic now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Joe, was Malcolm your first mentor?
Yeah, I think you would call him my first mentor. I mean, he's the one that was a professional, knew how to do it. He had actually
Worked in
he had actually worked in the minor leagues, and he had to quit when he was in AAA baseball because his brother-in-law was killed in a motorcycle accident. And back then, if you went home for some reason like that, they let you go. And so he went home, and he had a television repair service, and he did that till he died. But his daughter is an opera singer that sings on Broadway in New York, and I haven't seen her in a couple of years, but she's Mazel Sykes is her name, and she sings under that name. So if you're ever in a Broadway play and you hear this nice opera singer sing, you look at the program, be sure it's her. So
when you headed off to umpire school, what umpire school did you attend back then?
Well, back then there was an umpire development school that Kinnaman and Linsalata had just taken over. It was about the time that Harry had taken over the Wendelstedt school, because Harry and I actually worked together in the big leagues. I worked with Harry long before I ever worked with Hunter, and it was there were two schools at the time, and Harry's school was bigger than the umpire development school.
Do you remember what it cost to go to umpire school back in the late 70s?
$650.
Wow.
Yeah, but wow, we thought that was a lot of money.
Yeah, well, it was back then for sure. So the guy lurking down there in the corner is a special guest who said he'd pop in and say hello. He's worked with Joe before. Hey, welcome, Hunter.
I can't hear him.
No.
Yeah, I'm glad to see you, Joe, and it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, well, I see the stuff.
You can't get the lunch at school for $600 now. It seems like.
No.
So, hey, Joe, you actually finished as a top student when you went to umpire school and got hired right away, right?
Yeah, I finished first in the class, and they sent me over to Lakeland, Florida. There was that's a good picture, Hunter. I don't know where you got that background. That's a good picture. Is that on your wall?
My daughters told me how to do that. You think I could do that, Joe? No, that's my girls. When I told them I was going to pop on, I'm actually driving from Alabama back to Florida. And my girls said, well, what do you got to do? I said, well, I'm going to tell a story about Joe. And they're like, well, that could take years. Every story with Joe's a good story. So the whole family says hello to you, Joe. And, getting ready to get this season started so we can have you break that record. That's for sure.
We're going to talk about that a little later, Hunter. So very short minor league career. You get called up in 1976, and you're doing your first game in the majors in the National League, and you go an hour and 54 minutes. And
well, that was my first plate job, but I had two good pitchers. I had Phil Necro and I had Joaquin Andujar.
Yep.
So, hour and 54 was the norm back then because they threw strikes and guys tried to hit the ball, It's not like it is today where every at bat's a Broadway production. But yeah, it was an hour and 54 minutes.
I looked at the stats in that game. I think there was 3 home runs, 4 walks, 7 strikeouts between those two guys. A flamethrower and a knuckleballer, and there was only 7 strikeouts that day.
Yeah, but you got to realize back then they all swung the bat. They didn't take pitches like they do today.
And you actually, I found a quote from you, Joe. It says, "Nobody believes it when I tell them. They look it up and they come back and they shake their heads because it's real. It's true."
Yeah, well, it wasn't a few years later. I was working with Billy Williams, and it was a doubleheader in St. Louis, and the first game was like an hour 37, and the second game was an hour 51. We can't play one game in that length of time that we played 2 now. So
Yeah.
it's crazy, but it's all about the pitching. You know, if the pitchers go at them, then the game will move along. If the pitchers don't go at them, it's going to drag. Which is one reason I'm against them putting the DH in the National League, because at least half our games there's a chance that pitchers will go after them. You know,
I found a lot of Joe West quotes on the DH actually when I was looking into doing this with you, and you're not a fan of it.
Well, it's a bad rule. In fact, Ron Fairley, who was an old-time first baseman for both the Dodgers and the Cardinals, he told Joe Morgan when they put the rule in, he said, all this does is give the pitcher carte blanche to throw it whoever he wants to because he doesn't have to bat. And it's been proven over the years. I remember when Roger Clemens got traded from the American League to the Houston Astros. And in the American League, he was looked at as a headhunter. But the year he pitched for Houston and they went to the World Series, he didn't hit a single batter all year, not one. So there's a difference, and you look at the way the game is played in the National League with no DH. When they get to the 7th, 8th, and 9th hitter, the pitcher goes right after them,
Right?
Because they're going to be the weakest links in the lineup. In the American League, because of the DH, they're all hitters. So they don't go after anybody. They nibble and they pick. And if you watch, the best pitchers in the American League are the flamethrowers that go after them, like the Verlanders as far back as Clemens was pitching, you know. So you have to look at it that way. And it's a different game with the DH and without. It's completely different.
What do you think of it, Hunter, the DH?
Oh, I grew up in National League stock. We all hate it.
Right.
Joe summed it up. I would just be adding on to what Joe said.
Okay.
When you have no DH, you actually have to manage. When you talk to managers, they say it's tougher to manage in the National League, and they're more skillful normally. So, yeah, I'm against the DH as well.
Do you think it actually adds more time to the game?
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Joe?
And the great pitchers are going to pitch well no matter what league they're in.
Right.
But unfortunately for the mediocre pitchers, they're going to tap dance around. You know, now they got one more batter to tap dance around, like Joe said. So Joe's 100% spot on.
John Montefiusco, years ago, they asked him what he thought of the DH, and he says, well, I welcome it because their DH isn't going to be as good as mine. And they said, why is that? And he said, because their DH has to face me. But the truth of the matter is that they changed the game, and it was an attendance seeker in the American League because the American League wasn't drawing the same fans the National League was. The Yankees, if you'll remember, when Roger Maris hit his 61st home run, they didn't have 30,000 people in the stands, and they were losing the attendance battle every year with the National League because the National League had base running, they had the Maury Wilses, they had the Willie Mazes, they had the Hank Aaron's. And the American League wanted guys like Carter Yastrzemski and Mickey Mantle to play 1 or 2 more years just as a DH. So it was actually started by the owners. It wasn't something that the players came up with.
Well, since we're on things like the DH, let's talk about replay. When it first came out, how did you feel about it?
Well, we kind we kind of knew it was coming, and the best thing to do when they're going to force something on you is to make the best out of it. I think what we've done is we have the best replay system of all the major sports. The good thing about ours is we go into one location and the guys get to sit in and learn from it. A lot of our young guys have learned to umpire by watching replay, and that's a good thing. And they don't make the same mistakes that we did when we first came up, because they're learning different angles and different positioning as on-the-job training, which we had none of that. When I first came to the big leagues, if you asked them for a video of a play you had, they wouldn't give it to you. It took us years to get them to give us the feedback that we could use to improve our work. And now they have it instantly, and they can put it on a computer for you so that you can look at your game after the game's over, which I think is a good thing. And here's another thing. I hate the fact that any umpire's name is brought up and said the Cardinals lost the game because of the umpire, or the Mets lost the game because of an umpire. So we can correct some of the mistakes that we make, and that's what it's there for, is to help us get every play right, and that's what we're all striving to do.
I talked to quite a few of you guys. None of you are uptight about it. You accept it. It's part of the game now, and move on, right?
Well, it wasn't that way in the beginning.
No.
It was a mess in the beginning, because everybody was looking at it as, this is going to take our jobs away, and that and the other. And the crazy thing is that the players were the umpires have to run replay, because no techie is going to be able to do what the umpires do, which is a good thing. And in most cases, when it comes to things about calling the game, the players are going to take up for us.
What do you think, Hunter?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. At first, we were all nervous just based on the relationship that in the past, that we've had with management, because we were leery. But what it's done is Joe's had the best line, and he hasn't even said it yet, but they spent over $48 million to prove us, that we're wrong 1.1% of the time instead of just 1% of the time. So yeah, they spent a lot of money to prove us right. And Joe always makes good points. And I told you I'm in Alabama, so I'm bouncing back and forth, but I wanted to get one Joe West thing in there before I might lose my service. And it's not really a story. It's just that as legendary as he is on the field, and every umpire can learn to every time they talk with Joe, that's one of the reasons I was so excited to sign on, is I know I'm always going to learn something from Joe. But that doesn't only go on the field. He teaches lessons to everybody he meets, whether it's the little kid outside the ballpark, whether it's his crew, whether it's the crew families. I mean, my daughters were just so excited that Joe was going to be on a thing today, and they were worried about him and how's he feeling, just with they hadn't seen him since spring training. And right. Joe just brings that to everybody. For all the bad publicity, that's how you really do know there's fake news, because anyone that has ever been in contact with Joe West loves Joe West. And I could tell stories all night long, but that's the thing that I wanted everyone to know, is that if you've met Joe West, you love him, whether you've met him on the baseball field or if you're the little kid that people don't realize. If he has extra tickets, he goes and passes them out to fans outside the stadium. He's amazing, and he's going to have a deserved record here as soon as we get back up and playing. So we love you, Joe.
Thank you, Hunter. We love you too.
Hey, Hunter, one thing I notice is when I'm down at Wendell Stat Umpire School and Joe comes in for the day, and after lunch he talks to all the students. And you literally can hear a pin drop with the wind blowing, and there's Joe West up on the podium, no microphone, and there's 120 students, umpires, and I don't think Joe even thinks of them as your students. He thinks of them as 120 umpires. I'm going to share a little wisdom. Here's how you do it right. Here's the path to follow. I just, every time he talks, my hair stands up. It's that impressive. So I appreciate you sharing that, Hunter.
Yeah, no problem. And you're going to get some other great stories from Joe. And trust me, everybody out there that watches this and gets a chance to meet Joe, they're going to learn something. He's the best on and off the field for sure.
I agree. Thanks, Hunter.
All right. Take care, guys.
Yeah, see you, buddy. Well, there you go, Joe. You got a fan in Hunter Wendelstadt.
Yeah, I need a PR director like that, huh?
Let's talk about pace of play, Joe. Do you think we need pitch clocks and all that?
Well, I think the biggest problem with the pace of play is, like we said, is the pitching. They don't go after anybody. When the pitchers pitch and the hitters, and if the umpires will get the hitters in the box, the game's going to move along. But if they're going to go 3-2 and throw to first base 6 or 7 times when they get a runner on, that slows down the game, and nobody wants to see that. And it's crazy that Ted Williams was one of the first people to ever take the first strike. But then later in his career, he said, "Why should I take that first strike? That might be the best one I see."
Sure.
And that's a crazy thing that young hitters today, they go up there trying to work the pitcher. If you got a pitch that you can hit, you should be hitting it. And very seldom is a pitcher going to make 2 mistakes. So if he makes 1 mistake that you can hit, you should hit it. It's a funny thing that they're overthinking this game instead of playing it like you would as a kid, So, but the pace of play is it's hard. It's hard to keep the pace of play when you've got to wait for television to come back from a commercial.
Yeah.
But even so, waiting for the commercials, if the pitchers pitch and when they're ready, they go, we can move the game along. And some of it's the umpire's fault. The umpire has to do his job of keeping them in the box. Let's go, get in the box. And it's kind of funny, I can remember the first time David Ortiz came to the big leagues. It was a spring training game in Minnesota, and we were still American and National League. And they put him in as a defensive replacement. The Twins did at first base in like the 9th inning. And I can see that he's brand new. He's just tickled to be standing out there. And I mean, he could hit the ball a mile, but he wasn't a very good fielder. They put him in because it was a spring training game. And when he went to take his position, I said, I hope you play in this league a long time. And he said, well, thank you very much. I said, because as long as you're in this league, I won't be the ugliest guy in it. So he kind of bowed his head. And so now he gets traded from Minnesota. He goes to the Red Sox. He has a great career. And the last time I think it was the last time I saw him as a player, he came to bat and he said, I have something to tell you. And I said, I don't want to hear it. Get in the box. He says, no, just let me. I said, no, get in the box. Let's go. We're taking too long as it is. And I'm trying to hurry him along, get in the box. He says, let me just tell you one thing. So I said, okay, tell me one thing, then get in the box. He said, I'm retiring. I said, I don't care if you retire. He said, no. I said, you said one thing. He said, I'm retiring. I want to tell you one thing. I said, okay. He says, next year, you be the ugliest guy in the league.
Wow.
He remembered after all those years.
Did you have a good relationship with him through the years?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He was a good guy. He'd get upset every now and then when he'd get called out or something. And, he's a typical ball player. He wanted to win. They all want to win.
It seems that everybody talks to you, but a lot of guys don't talk to the younger umpires.
Well, in today's game, they don't know them because there's 76 of us. When I came up, there was only 24 umpires in the National League.
Wow.
So you'd go to Cincinnati 4 or 5 times. You go to L.A. 4 or 5 times. You go to the Mets 4 or 5 times because there was only 24 of you.
Yeah.
And when I started, there was no downtime. There were no vacations. They added 4 umpires to each league in 1979, and that gave us all 2 weeks off. They had to give us 2 weeks off so that we'd have, the umpires' numbers would work the games. And now we have replay that added 8 more. And since then we've expanded two teams. So, I mean, there's 76 of us out there.
Yeah.
And if you haven't been there for a while, they probably don't know the young umpires. And
right.
that's sad because when I first came in the league, I walked on the field in Atlanta, Georgia, that first series in September, and they knew who I was, and they'd go ask guys that had me in the minor leagues, who's that guy? Can you talk to him? Should you argue with him? Can you pick on him? And of course, those guys that had me in the minor leagues says, no, don't say a word to him.
Wow. Who was the best pure hitter you ever saw?
Wow. Well, Tony Gwynn was good. Albert Pujols was good. Ted Simmons was a great hitter. Barry Bonds. And Barry Bonds could do things other people couldn't do. He could turn on a ball that was inside and keep it fair. Where some guys are wasting a pitch, throw him inside, he'd yank the ball down the line and keep it fair. I didn't have Aaron or Mays, even though I thought Willie Mays in an old timers game could do more than most of these guys today. I did have Ken Griffey Jr. He was good. But it's tough to pick, the best of the bunch, because any given day they can all do certain things. And matter of fact, I had Barry Bonds' father, Bobby. He was a specimen of an athlete. He was unbelievable. I can't imagine an outfield with him and Willie Mays in it. And then, like I said, I didn't have Clemente and Aaron, and I never saw Mantle. So it's tough to pick them,
Well, there's a good bunch of guys that you named in there, and probably most of them are in the Hall of Fame.
Well, I have. They ran a statistic on the number of Hall of Famers I refer to as over 50.
Wow.
Players, coaches, and managers.
And you're on your 6th commissioner.
Yeah, and if I work this year, it'll be 6 decades.
Yeah. Greatest call you've ever seen in baseball, besides one that you've made?
Well, when I was still coming up, Hunter's dad had Don Drysdale in the middle of his scoreless inning streak. And this guy, I think his name was Dietz, Dick Dietz, reached out and got hit by an inside pitch from Drysdale. And Harry wouldn't let him go to first base because he tried to get hit by the pitch. I had never seen that called before. And since then, I've seen it about 5 times. But that was a big deal because he got the Giants out and they didn't score. And then he went like 10 or 15 more innings before his record got stopped. So that was one. I can remember umpires like Eddie Vargo and Doug Harvey. I worked with Shylock in spring training. Billy Williams, John McSherry.
Wow.
I've worked with over 150 different umpires being here this long.
Yeah.
And I tell people that's because no one wants to work with me.
Well, that's when you mentioned Nestor Shylock. He actually did the Toronto Blue Jays' very first game ever.
Yeah. Well, I had the Toronto Blue Jays' first World Series game at home.
92.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
So, hey, the best call that I've ever seen Joe West make is the call at second base in the Red Sox-Yankees League Championship.
You thought that was a better call than the one when I was behind the plate and we called A-Rod out?
I think that was, when you actually see the highlights of that, how close that was at second base, how they isolated it, and you just happened to be in the right spot and made a great call. And I always look at that one as my favorite Joe West call. I think it's a pretty good call. Great call.
Yeah. So does the manager of the Dodgers. He was the runner there.
That's right.
He said, "You're the one that made me famous."
Yeah. He's probably the only guy who could have got that base at the time.
Well, they knew he was going to steal, and they still couldn't throw him out.
Let's when you're talking about the Dodgers, how did it feel when Chase Utley decided in June 2016 to let's play a gag on Joe West and have every batter coming up to your music? How'd that go over?
Well, they were trying to make up for me being mad at Kershaw the day before.
Right. So, well, wasn't there a balk called the night before or something?
Yeah, I called a balk on Kershaw, and he got mad. And
next day, you're on the plate.
So the next day, I'm on the plate, and they batted around. I think they had 9 hitters come to the plate.
Right.
And they played one of my songs for every one of them.
Did you get royalties for that?
Oh, yeah. If it plays more than, I think it's 15 seconds, you get paid.
Who's the nicest player you've ever met?
Dale Murphy.
Dale Murphy.
Yeah, Dale Murphy would go sign autographs for the kids till the game started.
Wow.
He's one of the nicest people that you'll ever meet.
That has changed a lot from when I was growing up as a kid in Toronto, and it's really hard now. It's a different world now. So Dale Murphy was that kind of a guy, and he would sign all day. I think Cal Ripken was like that too.
Yeah, let me tell you a cute story about signing autographs. A friend of mine is named Fred Rogers, was in Montreal back in the early 80s. Yep. He won a trip on it's like an auction that the San Diego Padres had, and he won the trip, so he got to go on this trip with the Padres. And so he's sitting by the Expos dugout, and this little kid's yelling at Ellis Valentine to sign his glove. So, of course, Ellis took the glove because he had to throw it down because in Montreal, at the old Olympic Stadium, the seats there are above the dugout. So he took the glove and he signed the glove and he threw it back. And as the kid, he just like shook because he was so excited Ellis Valentine would sign his glove. And Fred said, so Ellis said, well, wait a minute, you got to sign my glove. So Ellis threw his glove up in the stands to the kid. And the little boy signed his name on Ellis Valentine's glove. And, of course, now the kid's the talk of the town, right? Yep. So Ellis gets traded to the Angels. And Fred lived in San Diego, and he went up working for this newspaper called Baseball Gold. And he told Ellis that he saw that happen. And Ellis went and got his glove and showed him where the kid signed it. He still had the glove. So you don't get enough good stories like that about baseball. You always hear the bad stuff. So we need to.
You like a good prank or a joke, right?
Well, sure.
And I'm sure you've been party to many of them. What's the funniest prank you've ever pulled on a player?
Well, we weren't pulling it on the player. We had a guy, a golf pro in San Diego, that said he was going to the game with some friends and he'd be in the upper box. So he said, how will I be able to convince them that I know you guys? And we'd done this before, so it was real easy to set up. I said, well, in the bottom of the 7th inning, barring a triple play, when they get the first out, we'll stop the game for no apparent reason. And you just tell the people that you're sitting with that the umpires are going to stop the game in the 7th inning. Nobody's going to know why. He said, you'll do that? I said, yeah, we'll do that. So Greg Maddux is pitching for the Dodgers. And we get to the 7th inning, he's got a no-hitter. So, well, that doesn't change what we told the guy. So he got a ground ball first out. And we went in and stopped the game, started pointing over the dugout. And so everybody's looking around, not knowing what we're doing because we weren't doing anything. And Maddux says, what's going on? And Eddie Hickok said, there's a laser over the third base dugout. He says, well, what's it pointing at? He says, well, it's like a rifle scope laser. He said, well, He said, well, what are they pointing at? He said, right at you. And Maddox ran around and hid behind me. And he got the next two guys out, so we didn't affect it. But of course, the guy upstairs said, that was the greatest thing in the world. I told all my guys you were going to stop the game, and you did.
One thing I noticed about Joe West, and I've actually been in the car with you and driving to the stadium going in Detroit, and you come out of the hotel, you hang a right, and it's closed off, but Joe West just gets to pull up on the curb and goes on the road, and it's a 5-minute drive down to the stadium. But all the way there, all the fans are going, hey, Joe, hey, Joe, hey, Joe. I'm thinking, oh, my goodness, this is unreal. Like, you're recognized so much and they know you're an umpire. But the funny Joe West prank to me was we pull in under the stadium and Ford Field's to our right. And, you know, I got a couple umpires, and I think Ripper was in there and Fletcher and with Sandra. And the girl says, can I help you? And you said, yeah, and Garth Brooks is in town that night playing at Ford Field. And you said, yeah, I'm Joe West, and this is my crew for the Garth Brooks sound crew. And this girl's looking for us on the list, and she can't find it. and you do it again, and she's looking, and you can see her getting flustered. And I'm going, oh my God. And next thing, the other security guard down when you go in, he says, Joe, knock it off. Like he knew you were winding her up. But she believed that we were the sound crew for Garth Brooks. And it's just all the way to the stadium, people waving to you. You're hanging out the window. It's like the Babe Ruth movie. Hey, babe. It's, hey, Joe. Hey, Joe. And I think there's a warm spot. Like that people have a warm spot for how long you've been in the game. And I think it's really cool. And that was my funny Joe West story that it'll live forever, because it was just out of the blue. You just said, I'm Joe West. I'm the Garth Brooks sound crew manager. This is my crew. And the girl's looking for it. It was priceless.
And she couldn't find it either.
Couldn't find it. It was unbelievable. So let's talk about the integrity of the game. I know I've talked to you about this. You are an absolute believer in maintaining the integrity of the sport of baseball. Tell us about that.
Well, I always tell every young umpire that he has three responsibilities. And the first responsibility is to the game. And that doesn't necessarily mean the commissioner's office or the local commissioner, whoever you work for. No matter what, when you're an umpire, your first responsibility is to the sport of baseball. Because without the sport of baseball, none of this exists. There's no Tigers, there's no Blue Jays, there's no Dodgers, there's no Yankees. So you have to protect its integrity. You have to protect what it's there for. And it's there to teach sportsmanship, fair play, and everything. So your first responsibility is to the game. Your second responsibility as an umpire is to the profession of umpiring. And that might not mean the union or the association you work for, but it means the umpiring profession. And your third responsibility is to do what you know in your heart is honest and morally correct, and not let that waver any decision that you make. And if you do those things in that order, nothing you do will be wrong. You will get ridiculed for it, because that's human nature. It's like a judge has to pass down a sentence.
Sure.
It's absolutely correct. And it's going to make a lot of people upset, but he has to do what he knows in his heart is correct. It's the same thing here. And I try to relate that to other professions that we have, whether it be President of the United States or Prime Minister of Canada or whoever. Your first responsibility is to your country, you know, and they don't, most politicians don't get that. But umpires get that. They understand that without baseball, they wouldn't be there. Without baseball, the Yankees wouldn't be there. Without baseball, the Marlins wouldn't be there. Without baseball, none of us would be here. So it's important that you protect that entity.
Sure.
And I don't back down from anybody when it comes to taking care of the game. And you know, it's really funny. I had a good friend of all of baseball, Bob Watson, died this past week.
Yes.
In fact, in my first game in Atlanta, he hit a ball down the left field line that just barely curved foul, and they were all bending their head to see if it made it. And I called it foul, and the second base umpire, Paul Pryor, walked over and says, "That was close, wasn't it?" I said, "Yeah, it was close." Thank God the foul pole's that high. But Bob and I used to go round and round when he worked for the commissioner's office. But he believed in the integrity of the game. He would take up for the players sometimes. He'd take up for the umpires sometimes. And he and I used to fight about certain things. But we always respected what each other's intent was. And that was the entire integrity of the game. So
Andy Fletcher made a pretty good quote about what he thinks of you. And he said, Wes takes pride in protecting the best interest and integrity of the game more than anyone I've ever worked with. That's a pretty powerful statement coming from a guy who was on your crew.
Yeah, and he's worked with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like Fletch. He likes to have a joke. He likes to laugh. He likes to needle. It's pretty funny. But that's a really nice quote that he meant, what he said there.
He's a good guy.
Yep.
He's a good guy. And he's a good umpire. You know, he came to me last year. We have this machine that grades us, and they're trying to put in the automated strike zone and all that stuff. And he says, "I thought I had a good game last night." I said, "Well, you did. You had a great game. I can't recall a pitch that I would have changed from second base because I worked across from him." He said, "Well, the machine said I missed 6 pitches." Now let's put it in perspective. You call 200 and some pitches, and the machine said you missed 6, right? And some of these are going to be so finite that, you know, even the machine can't be right because it's biangulated instead of triangulated. And then he said, but the machine didn't grade 14. So the machine completely missed 14 pitches.
Wow.
So I said, let me get this straight. We're going to use a machine to call balls and strikes that misses twice as many pitches as you do. And he of course, he didn't think it was funny at first, but after he thought about it, he thought it was hilarious.
So, as a major league crew chief, Joe, tell me what your job is. Don't give me the textbook version of it. Tell me from your heart what your job is as a major league crew chief.
Well, it's like I said before. Your first job is to protect the game. Your second job is to protect your peers and to do what you know is honest and morally correct. They are, as a crew chief, those other 3 umpires are your flock, and you need to take care of them.
Yeah.
And you need to take care of them as if, you know, a mother goose would look after her gooselings. That's part of your job. And you may have to go in and protect your family when they're wrong. And you can fix that later or fix it through replay or whatever. But you have to protect them. And that's kind of the way I look at it.
40 plus years. What's it like to work with guys you worked with and now you work with their sons? 3 sets, father and son combos. That's incredible.
Well, I hadn't worked with the grandson yet, so I think I'm okay.
Yeah. I think if you get to work with a grandson, it's been in the game too long.
Well, I don't know. I had Carl Yastrzemski in spring training, and I had his grandson this year.
Yeah.
But that was a player.
Yeah.
They're a lot younger, you know.
But it is kind of neat, though, to actually work with guys you used to work with and their kids come through and become major league umpires. That's pretty cool, actually. Doesn't happen in a lot of sports.
You know, Tom Gorman was my first crew chief, and I was Tom Gorman's son's first crew chief,
Wow.
Brian.
Wow.
So that's kind of interesting.
I guess we're going to have a few retirements coming up in the next few years. New young guys. There's a lot of young guys now working at a relatively not an advanced age. They're getting hired younger and younger now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the youngest guys in the American League were Billy Evans, Jimmy Evans, Larry Barnett. Larry Barnett worked a playoff, an All-Star game, and a World Series before he was 30. In the National League, there was Lee Wire, McSherry, Montague. I was pretty young. I don't know where I stood as being the youngest. I may be close, but yeah, we had a lot of guys that came up young. Lee Wire was a tremendous guy. He was about 6'8", and he weighed about 320 pounds, and he had a real high pitched voice like this.
Wow.
He called strike one, and people look around and couldn't believe it came out of him.
What do you think of? Obviously, you have 59 games to tie the all-time record and 60 to actually break the record. What does that record mean to you, Joe?
Well, it means I've been here a long time.
Yeah.
But they keep changing the numbers. I don't think the statisticians have an accurate count of the numbers that he had. And I mean, I worked this year, and my count for my games, I lost a game somewhere, and Bill Clem gained 5. So I don't know how many the number is.
I think it's I looked at the math today. I think it's 59 to tie it and 60 to break it. So what does that mean to you? Not that you've been here a long time. It's just, it's quite an accomplishment to be the all-time games work guy, the king. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, it is. It's quite an accomplishment, and I mean, but you got to realize the guy whose record I'm shooting for worked 100 World Series games.
Right.
And he didn't have playoffs back then. He didn't have the wild card and the division series and the league championship. How many of those games do you think he'd have worked if they had all that? So,
yeah, true. Actually, didn't he work longer too?
No, he only worked 37 years.
Okay.
He and Fleming worked 37 years.
Wow. So, do you think we're having baseball this year?
Oh yeah, there's way too much money at stake for them to shut it down.
No fans in the stands, though.
Well, they may start that way, but I don't think that'll last long. I think this coronavirus has just about run its gamut, and they're realizing they can control it. And it's sad that it got to be this big of a pandemic when the people that are dying from it or have other problems too. Like, I mean, Joe Diffie, the singer in Nashville, he had stage 4 lung cancer. People, and they say he died with the coronavirus. I don't think so. I mean, that might have been part of the report, but he died of lung cancer. And Bucky Pizzarelli, who used to play guitar for Doc Severinsen, he died of heart failure. But they said he died of the coronavirus. So there's too much of that going on. I mean, it's easy to write that on.
Yeah. Are you feeling pretty safe down in Florida?
I haven't worn a mask, and I haven't missed a day playing golf unless it rained.
Oh.
And the restaurants have been open now for 2 weeks, and some of the people are leery of going out, but I'm not seeing anything. And in fact, some of the businesses, because of the takeout business, they did just as good as when they were open for a full business.
Sure.
So,
hey Joe, do you want to take some questions from Tommy, who's got a bunch of questions from our audience?
Sure.
Ahead,
All right. So we got a couple of fun questions we're going to start out with. So the first one comes from Kyle Albert. His question is, Joe, the first thing that went through your mind when Nelson Cruz took that selfie with you during the All-Star game a few years ago?
Yeah.
All I could think of was, I can't even tell this guy to get the hell away from me. I've got a microphone on. That was the first thing I thought. And then I said, well, I better make it look good. So That's what the first thing I thought of was, what is this idiot doing? And
Well, that's pretty funny.
actually, it was comical, but it was a neat deal to the All-Star game, and the media handled it real well.
Everybody handled it fantastically.
Yeah. So yeah, but that was the first thing I thought of. I can't even tell this guy to get away from me.
All right, so Annie Oakley asks, since you've traveled all over to officiate games, is there any one tradition at a park that really stands out to you?
A tradition at a park. Is this Annie Oakley? Was she the sharpshooter?
No.
Okay.
That's who that is, but her name's not Annie Oakley. That's her pseudonym on Facebook.
Okay, all right.
She's an umpire, by the way. Been to pro school?
Oh, I don't know. Has she?
Yep.
Well, let's see. I know that the seventh inning stretch in St. Louis is different than most because they play for the Budweiser theme. And they used to, in the playoffs, they used to run the Clydesdale horses around the field. I know that they play Sweet Caroline in Boston.
Yep.
At the seventh inning. And I remember one time he came out to perform it live, and the sound was so bad. I felt sorry for him because it just didn't have the same, volume to it and everything. So, but there's the seventh inning stretch used to be sung by an opera singer where they'd sing God Bless America in New York. Ty Ronan, he had an awesome voice. And I didn't realize that he was handicapped until years later. But those are the kind of things that you look back on and remember. And then the Yankee ground crew comes out to that and the second time they rake the infield, they play it to that song YMCA. The first time I ever saw that, I started laughing. And Jerry Crawford came over and said, "Don't laugh. They do it every game." So, but it's kind of funny, There's a lot of little things that go on, and that that's kind of a neat question, Rita and I were figuring out, one of the kids on the crew, I think it was Ripperger, asked me, how many different stadiums have you umpired major league games in? And we counted them, and we came with over 50. Now, you got to realize that I worked in 3 different stadiums in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
But going to Tokyo, going to Monterrey, Mexico, of course, Montreal in Canada, and not counting the cities today.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So, and I umpired in Santurce at Bithorn Stadium, and so it's been. And the crazy thing is, she talks about rituals. If you were in a Japanese game, they pound the drums and they make noise on every pitch.
Yeah.
You could hardly hear yourself think over there. But that's an interesting question. So thank her for asking that.
Yeah, good answers though.
So on top of that, Joe, Paul Golden asked the question about ballparks. What are your favorite ballparks, both open and closed?
Well, I don't think that they could ever repeat the design of Dodger Stadium. I think Dodger Stadium is, especially when the O'Malleys were running, it was the best facility that we had because you could actually eat off the floor.
Wow.
And it was symmetrical. It was made for baseball. Everything about it is symmetrical. It's not like you have a porch in right field or a big wall in left field. Everything is fair to everybody. I think that the Angels tried to copy Yankee Stadium a little bit when they built their ballpark. And it's kind of funny. I like the old Yankee Stadium better than I did the new part. The new City Field is beautiful, but the retractable dome in Seattle is a great ballpark. Even though we got wet one day because the groundkeeper wouldn't put the roof on. And the Marlins Stadium in Miami is beautiful. The Houston Stadium's beautiful, and I'm expecting this stadium in Arlington to be unbelievable because
it looks nice.
Yeah, but the Blue Jay Stadium is nice. There's only one thing wrong with it: you can interfere with a ball that's in fair territory down the right and left field line, and I don't think they thought of that when they were putting it together. But you got to remember, they're also the first team to ever draw 4 million in the American League.
Sure.
And so it's unique. The crazy thing about baseball is each stadium is a little bit different. And in some cases, like Wrigley Field and Fenway Park, they're built the way they are because that's all the room they had.
Yeah.
That's all they had. And O'Malley moved the Dodgers from Brooklyn to the West Coast because they wouldn't let him build a dome stadium. And people today don't know that because hell, they weren't born back then. But it's amazing that that this sport has survived player strike, owners lockouts, umpire strikes, umpire lockouts, fights between players and coaches, fights between coaches and managers, fights between managers and umpires, fights between ball players and owners. And it thrives in spite of all the failures of the sport. I mean, if you hit 300, you're looking at a possible Hall of Fame career.
Sure.
There's no other sport where you can fail 7 out of 10 times and go in the Hall of Fame. No other sport.
Nope.
And I've always said the most difficult thing in the world is hit a round ball with a cylindrical bat square, and then hit it where they can't catch it. So, but and I said this on I had a Diamond Dreams album where I put out, and it was all baseball stories. And I said, I've been lucky because as an umpire, you get to witness a piece of history every day. And that's a good thing. Sometimes they're bigger pieces of history than others, and sometimes they sneak up on you and become big pieces of history. But it's really unique.
Tommy?
All right, so the next question is between a couple of people. So the main person I'm asking it from is from Shigenori Yamamoto, and this is translated from Japanese. He says, Mr. Joe West, I pay tribute to you. Actually, I'm being referred to by Joe West of Japan and myself. However, since I can't speak English, I ask a question in the text-to-Google Translate app. So please forgive me if there's a misunderstanding. I think that you can move quickly to the place where play occurs, but what kind of consciousness do you take the first step to step? And he says he is also a friend of Takeshi Hirabayashi, and I'm sorry for butchering those names.
No, we met them over there when we went to work the Tampa Bay Yankees series. I want to say it was 2004. So it was a while back, but they have a lot of pride in what they do over there. And the most amazing thing about the Japanese is everything they do to the best of their ability. I don't care if they're the maid in the hotel room or the guy polishing the car downstairs. They do everything the very best they can do, and they're so proud of their heritage. It's amazing, and we could learn a lot of lessons from them. But to get back to the question at hand, your first step, and I remember when I played football in college, and if you were a defensive back or a linebacker, your first step is to read what's going on. And in football, that first step was usually a step back or to get your balance or whatever. In baseball, your first step is usually to move forward. And you can see that by a lot of infielders. Their first step will be to move in. The same thing's true about umpiring. And you have to, the difference in umpiring and playing is you don't chase the ball. You let the play take you to your position. So it's a completely different mindset. As the ball's hit, you go after it as a player. Whereas in baseball, if the ball's hit, especially if you're not working a four-man system, you may be going completely away from it. So it's a different mindset. It's a whole different way to look at the game. And it's really funny. Once you learn what umpiring is about, you'll end up watching the umpires because you'll see, oh, he took this step, he did that. And again, that's what happens when we go look at replay. They'll go, wow, he was in great position. How did he get there? And everybody will want to watch and see. Or he didn't get in good position. There has to be a reason why. So it's unique. The first step, and John McSherry used to be the very best at it because he wasn't as fast as everybody else. And his first step was always right. And he had great instincts. And he was over 300 pounds.
So Mike Peterson kind of asks a question, as you've gotten older, how do you make certain you're still in great position to make a call?
Well, I can probably relate that to a story because I've had a lot of guys, young umpires, say, tell me how to take a play at first base. And I say, I can't. And they say, well, why? And I'll say, because I've had over 1,500 plays at first base. And you might not have had 1,500 plays in your entire career. And when the shortstop lets go of the ball, I know where it's going. And until you've done it as many times as I have, you can't do that. And it's sad to tell a young guy, I can't help you with that because you don't have enough experience. You have to learn it by doing it. And it's pretty much the way it is. Yet, I can tell you when you see the first baseman go a certain way to get the ball, I can tell you what you should be trying to do to adjust to it. But if you're watching the ball like you're supposed to, and you don't know where it's going, and you have to follow the ball 7/8 of the way there, you're not going to see that the first baseman came off the bag and is going to tag the guy. In situations like that, I mean, it's hard to explain certain things that, like Eddie Vargo. Eddie Vargo run all over the field, and he had no idea where he was going, but when the play happened, he's waiting for it in position. He had no idea how to do it. He had no idea how to tell you to do it, but he was always in position. And that's from his experience. I hope I answered the question.
I think you did.
Yep.
So here's a good question from Josh Friedman, and I always talk to my friends about this, and I actually looked this video up earlier today. I call it the Incredible Hulk play because ESPN made you into an Incredible Hulk. That batted ball to your chest when you were at first base. Josh Friedman asked, exactly how much did that hurt?
Oh, I had a little bruise the next day. But that's another thing. You can't let them know they hurt you. You know, you get hit with a foul tip, you can't dance around back there. You have to just shake it off and go on.
So speaking of getting hit with fouls, who were some of your, and this is from Richard Boylan, who were the best or your favorite catchers to work behind that are not in the game today?
Oh, well, Jerry Grody and Benito Santiago, Manny Senguian, they all gave you such a good look at the pitch. Steve Yeager, if you missed a pitch with one of those guys catching, then you weren't paying attention. One of the hardest guys to work behind because he was so big was Bench. So he never moved. He'd sit right behind the middle of the plate. Of course, he didn't have a very good pitching staff either. He was just trying to get him to throw it to him. But he was hard to work behind because of his broad shoulders. He had like a size 8 head. Bruce Bochy was hard to work behind, but he was a good catcher. But those guys, Grody was unbelievable. Like I said, Sanguian. I'm trying to think. Who was the guy just went in the Hall of Fame? Pudge Rodriguez. He was easy to work behind.
Is that a true story when you got his car towed?
Well, they didn't tow his car, but he thought they were towing it.
I saw that. I saw that somewhere, and I went, "That's Joe. That's Joe for sure." So what happened? He parked his car in your spot.
He parked his car at one of the umpire spots, and when I pulled up, the security guard said, "I'm sorry, but Pudge parked in one of your spots. You're gonna have to." I said, "That's all right. There's plenty of parking. Don't worry about it." So I went out to the home plate, and he's going to catch the top half of the first inning. So I told the other umpires, I said, "Wait right here till he comes out to catch." And when he did, I said, "Some SOB parked in my spot in this big Hummer." And so I had him tow it. Said, "They ain't parking in my spot." Right. And it was his car, and I knew it was his car. He called the first 3 outs and was gone. He left.
Nice. Tommy?
All right, so William Dole asks actually a pretty good question. This might take you a little while to answer. Could you take us through what a World Series is like? Your selection, your arrival to Game 1, getting ready to work the games, traveling to the visitor cities, the scheduling, all the rigmarole around the World Series.
Well, of all the events you work, the most hype is going to be in the World Series. But of all the games you work, the easiest ones are going to be the World Series because they're the best teams. Now, the biggest part of the World Series is who you're going to take to the game, who you're going to get tickets for, because it's a big event for the cities that are in it. So you have to set aside, I've got this many people I need to get tickets for, and that's the hardest part of the whole thing, is to set people up with seats, especially when you don't have them in your hand. You have to call the office and say, "I need this, this, and this." And that's another thing. You have to pay for them all. So you'll end up having to front the money, even though you'll get paid later by the people that want the tickets. But that's not easy. And then you have to say, "Well, my family's coming. I'm going to need 2 or 3 rooms." And baseball's really good about getting you the first room because they want you there to work. But sometimes it's tough to get 3 or 4 rooms when a World Series is coming to town. So that kind of stuff and the hype of that is tough to deal with. And in fact, you can't wait to get on the field because then you can finally relax. But it's a great honor to be picked for a World Series. It can be fun because you're going to be with those guys, those umpires, for the next 7 days, if it goes that long. And then you have to think that, this is something they're going to look back on in their life as one of the greatest things of their life, which is, it really is for some of these people. But it's a little bit easier in the league championship. It's a little bit easier in the divisional series. But the hardest games you're going to ever work in the big leagues is that 1-game playoff at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it's the wild card game or the 2 teams are tied, because it's all on 1 game. And there's a lot more scrutiny and pressure on you there than there is in the World Series. But like I said, the World Series is usually going to be the easiest games you work because they're the 2 best teams, or 2 of the best teams, I should say.
All right, so Falco Shaida asks, how difficult is it to be away from family for long periods of time? And have you ever regretted your decision to become an MLB umpire?
Well, I look back on it, and there's times I think, and I don't have any kids, so I'm lucky there. But and I try to take Rita everywhere I go, that she'll go with me. But I miss the times I could have spent with my mom and dad and her mom and dad. And of course, my brother's the kind of guy that you'd think, birth control should be retroactive for, but I miss the time that I get to spend with him too. But I think the toughest part of this job for anyone that has a family is being away from home. And if you can take your kids with you and your wife with you, I think you should.
Yeah.
So Brad Hewitt asks a pretty good question. After a day game, what's your favorite restaurant to enjoy dinner, and in what city is it?
Oh, that's hard. Because if you're in Cincinnati, you want to go to Walt's Hitching Post across the river, and if you're in Miami, you want to go to Catfish Dewey's or Smith and Walensky. If you're in New York, you want to go to Smith and Walensky. Chicago, you want to go to Gibson's. I mean, there's so many restaurants on the West Coast. I like the Fish House in San Diego. I like the Black Whale in L.A. There's a little steakhouse in Detroit.
Chop House.
What's it called?
Chop House.
Yeah, it's the London Chop House. Yeah, it's a great place.
You recommended it to me.
Yeah, that's right. I was having trouble thinking of the name.
Yep.
But yeah, there's places all around the country. I mean, St. Louis, I used to like to go to Shannon's, but they're closed now because of the Ballpark Village. But there was another restaurant, Bartolino's, I go to. So
too many to mention, really.
Huh?
Too many to mention.
Oh yeah. You could write a book on all of them.
Speaking of writing a book, are you going to write a book on your career?
I think you need to read the book before you write one. So that's kind of put on hold for a while.
I think it'll be a bestseller. The stories you can tell, it'll be a good.
Well, the hardest part about writing a book is you don't want to put anything in writing that hurts somebody's feelings, and that sometimes some of the stories you tell will hurt somebody's feelings. So I'm a little leery about that. I'd be more inclined to tell stories about the people I've met, like Donnie Anderson, who played with the Packers, and Gary Knaffel, who played with the Packers, and Dick Butkus, all the different people I've met. I mean,
yeah.
Through this, I met Bill Clinton, I met Jimmy Carter, I met both Bushes, and I've never met a prime minister of Canada, so I need to do that before too long. But I met Donald Trump. I met Donald Trump in the first row of the box seat at Citi Field. I met dozens of military people. General Ordiarno from the Army Chief of Staff, I met him. General Ray Smith, General Marty Steele. It's been this profession has opened a lot of doors. I sang with Mickey Gilley, Boxcar Willie, Johnny Lee. I just did an interview with the Oak Ridge Boys on Prime Country, and T.G. Shepherd just taped an interview on the Elvis Channel. So I know a lot of people in the music industry. I know a lot of people in politics, and even though I'm not a very good politician because I don't tend to say what people want to hear, but um, and I really believe that, you know, the coolest thing about living in this country is that we have the freedoms to do what we do. So baseball is an important part of our society, and we owe those freedoms to the people that protect us, the military, and the people that stand up for us. And it's I can remember most every Sunday I was in San Diego, they'd bring the sailors and the Marines to the game on Sunday afternoon, and about the third or fourth inning, they'd play Anchors Away, and those sailors would get up like little kids and cheer like it's a basketball game or something. And the next half inning, they'd play the Marines hymn, and every one of those Marines would stand at attention and sing the Marines hymn. And you kind of feel a rush of energy go through the whole ballpark, and you feel goosebumps come up with your arm, and you realize, you know, we're lucky that we live here.
Sure.
And I always tell this story about that. I say that Tony Blair, when he was Prime Minister of Great Britain, was asked by a member of his parliament, he said, "Why do you always take up for the Americans?" And he said, "Well, there's two reasons. One is you look at how many people are trying to get into a country and how many people are trying to get out. And the other is only two people ever died for you, Jesus Christ and the American GI. One died for your soul and the other died for your freedom." And so whenever I do a show where I'm singing, I'll tell that story, and then I'll do The Fight Inside of Me by Merle Haggard after that. So,
yeah. Tony?
So this question is from Tommy Owens, who's on the other end of this mic. So the Naked Gun movie, was that just the luck of the draw that your crew was working a game in a city where they were filming, or did they reach out and contract you guys? How did that all come about?
No, that was done in the off season. And if you'll remember, the stadium was Dodger Stadium. And Walter O'Malley, yeah, it was Walter because he still owned the club then, leased the stadium to Paramount Pictures. And Lee Wire had that part that I had, but Lee Wire had to go to a crew chief meeting. And he didn't want to tell baseball, "I can't go to the meeting because I'm shooting a movie." So he called Eddie Montague. And Eddie Montague said, "I'm not going to L.A. for 3 weeks and leave Marcia at home." I said, "Well, don't leave her at home. Take her with you." He said, "Oh, she won't want to go to L.A. for 3 weeks." So they called me, and when they offered, I think it was $1,000, I said, "Plus expenses?" And they said, "No, this is for a day actor." I said, "I'm not doing it." So they called back. And this is like the middle 80s. And they said, "We'll give you $3,000 a week." So I figured, okay, I can fly out there and I can stay with some friends of mine and I can pocket all the money. And so that's what I did. And it's funny, I think I got $9,000 to shoot it. And I made over $150,000 in residuals.
Wow.
Wow. So do you still get residuals from that to this day when it plays?
Every quarter.
Wow.
Every quarter. And the crazy thing is it had a good run in the beginning. And then the OJ situation with his trial and everything.
Yep.
They showed it again. I got more residuals while he was on trial than at any other time.
It's not fun.
So the next question comes from Kathleen Morrison. She says, "You've seen a lot of changes in the game. When do you think we might see a female in MLB?" She asked about on the field with you, but where females are in the process, unless you're going to be here for probably 4 or 5 years. When do you think we might see a female on the field?
Well, I thought Pam Poston was going to make it. And I think if Bart Giamatti had lived, she would have made it. She was, at the time, she was the best female umpire that they'd ever had. And if she hadn't come up at the same time with Larry Poncino and Greg Bonet and Tommy Hallion and so on, she might have made it. but she came up with a lot of good quality umpires. And I would say she was better than average, but these other guys were great. They were really good. And she had a tougher road than anybody else, which wasn't fair. But, I mean, you have to, when you're put in that situation, you have to be better than everybody else. So, and again, it wasn't fair that she was the first, although she wasn't the first in professional baseball. She was just the first to ever get invited to spring training with the National League. So, anyway, but I don't know. I don't see, and of course, Hunter would better be able to answer that because he would know more about the females that are in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
But I thought she had a chance. And, uh-oh.
Tommy?
All right, so David McDonald asked a question. If after you retired from umpiring, Fox or TBS or one of the networks offered you a job as a rules analyst on playoff game broadcast, would you consider something like that?
Probably not. Probably not, because, I mean, even I don't want to critique my peers' work. And I'll give you a good example. The play I had in between Boston and Houston, where Altuve hit the ball in the right center field or right field. What's his name? Bettis jumped up and the fan closed his glove.
Yeah.
And I called him, and I called it interference and called him out. Well, even replay agreed with me. But what if I don't agree with replay? Yeah. And I'm the analyst. That's not fair. It's not fair to the process. If you're saying, do I have the credibility to do something like that? Well, yeah. But so does Tim McClellan, and so does Terry Tata, so does Steve Ripley, and they're all retired. Why didn't they do it? Why didn't they do it before?
So, what about this year when you get back on the field? The crew chief will now be mic'd up to talk to the audience, or how will that work? If there's no fans, you're not going to do that, right?
Yeah, you're still going to have to do it for the radio and TV.
Okay, so have you guys been trained how to do it?
Yes, yeah, they took us to clinics. Yeah.
They didn't get like Ed Hockley or somebody to come give you all training in arm signals or anything, did they?
No.
Okay.
No.
Checking.
Hey, Tommy, we got 2 more questions, and then we got to wrap it up.
All right. So let's see. Here's a good one from Chip Chapman. Well, you may or may not want to answer this one. What are your thoughts on the Hawkeye TrackMan systems?
The Hawkeye TrackMan systems. Well, you're talking to the wrong guy there, because the only thing I know about Hawkeyes is an old golf club. I guess this is the same thing they're using in tennis for golf
and rugby over in Europe.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know if it's that accurate. I know that in dealing with these Marines and Army people, that there's never been a Marine that didn't take sniper training. And I know that when you're trying to get an exact coordinate on something, that you have to triangulate it. You can't biangulate it, which is how they judge the pitches on us now. So it's not as accurate as a sniper's scope and triangulation of everything. And the crazy thing is that we're in a situation where they're using this stuff to enhance the broadcast. It is not to say that they're right and the umpire's wrong, or that the umpire's right and the Hawkeye's wrong. The fact is, it's something to enhance the broadcast. I've had people tell me they don't like the box on TV.
Yeah. And
we've proven that the box on certain broadcasts isn't even close to being accurate. And by their own television replays and stuff. So I'm all for doing everything we can to be the best that we can be. But I wouldn't have an opinion on this system because I don't know enough about it to make an honest judgment. And I mean, if I did, maybe I could design one myself. So,
all right. So here's probably a good question for our final question. So far, what has been the favorite memory of your umpire career? And that's from Isaac with a Z started last name, Zywak.
Zywak, yeah.
Zywak, your favorite memory from your umpire career so far?
Well, I got a letter from a guy who said that I gave him a baseball when he was a child. And he said, my grandfather used to take me to watch the Astros play. And I went up to the fence behind home plate, and he was only like 4 years old at the time. He said, and I put $5 through the screen as if I was going to bribe you, and you took it from me. And so I saw it broke his heart, so I took it back and gave it back to him. The next day, I walked over and gave him a ball. And I wrote on it, and says, always play hard and fair, your friend, Joe West. Well, at the time, I'd been hanging around with some of the band members from Merle Haggard. And Bonnie Owens told me, if you ever sign something, always date it so you can remember what it was. Well, I dated it because that's what she told me to do. Well, it was about 2 or 3 years ago, I got a message on an email from that little boy who was now a grown man and had 2 kids. And he said his grandfather had died that day. And he sent me a picture of the baseball. And of course, it had the date and everything. And he told me the whole story all over again. And I actually remembered it. And so I was getting on an airplane to go to Seattle from Orlando. So I called Phil Jansen, who was the comptroller for the union. And I said, can you send flowers to this guy's funeral? He had to look up where the funeral was in Texas. And he found it. And we sent him a display of flowers and everything. So next week, I get another email from the same guy. And he was just impressed that I thought enough to send flowers. So I said, well, I'm coming to Houston in a couple of weeks. I said, why don't you bring your son to the game and we'll start over. Nice. So we did. And when I told the Astros what I was doing and I told them about the baseball and I sent them everything, the Astros arranged for parking. They got them tickets. Nice. They didn't use my tickets. They used theirs. They gave them they took them downstairs to the restaurant and everything. I mean, they treated them like royalty. They treated them like they treat the Bushes when they go there. So that's probably my favorite memory.
We're done, eh, Tommy?
We're done, Joe. If you stay on the line after we go off for a few minutes.
But just before we close, Joe, I got a great way to raise some money for Umps Care Charity. When you break that record, I think we should do 9 lineup card folders and swap one out every inning and let people, and we can auction them off, and people will have a piece of history. There'll be 9 lineup card holders with a special logo for you, and you'll get one, I'll get one, and we'll sell 7. And we'll auction them off for Umps Care Charity. What do you think?
Well, why don't you make 15 and we can do more?
But only 9 will be used in the game, though. So, or we can do 18. You swap them out every half inning.
There you go.
Actually, game-used, record-breaking lineup card folder.
Okay.
We'll talk about it. So,
Okay.
hey, Joe, I just want to say thanks for doing this, Joe. With this COVID-19, there's been so many guys on the internet doing these kind of shows, and I've been lucky to have some major league guys and some other great guests. And I just want to say, on behalf of the Ump Life Nation, thanks for doing this, my friend. I really appreciate it.
Well, you should thank Tommy, too, because without him, we wouldn't have had any video.
Tommy, and a big thanks for Hunter for popping in. That was real nice of him doing that, too. So thanks, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your kind words, Joe.
Thank you. How was that, Rita? Huh? And his eyes looked into mine.
Thank you for joining us for this broadcast of Gotta Ask with tonight's guest, Joe West. Please join us for future broadcasts. This episode will be posted to the Ump Life page and the Ump Life TV YouTube channel later this evening. Have a good evening, and may you and your family stay safe and healthy.
Told their story long before the TV screens. Mom and Dad watched the radio as if they could see. A ballpark in their minds where the grass was always green.